Now gather close, because this is a story about how sometimes the people with the biggest degrees and the fanciest titles know absolutely nothing about the human heart, and how true wisdom can sometimes be found sitting behind a wheel of a city bus. Her name was Sarah Jenkins, and for 12 years, she had been a machine built for efficiency. She lived in Chicago, right in the thick of the loop, in one of those sleek, glass towers that looked like they were trying to pierce the clouds. Sarah was 34, a senior systems analyst at Synergy Solutions, a company that specialized in making other companies run faster and leaner. They paid her a fortune, and in return, they owned every waking hour and a good chunk of her sleeping ones, too. Sarah was the kind of person who color-coded her grocery list. She thrived on control. If you asked her what her passion was, she'd probably say data integrity. She was the first one in the office, usually around 5:30 a.m., and the last one to leave. She used to joke that the cleaning crew knew her better than her own family. The trouble started not with a bang, but with a persistent low hum, like a refrigerator that was just about to die. It began subtly, forgetting where she parked her car, even though she took the same spot every day. Then came the insomnia. She'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling of her high-rise apartment, her brain running 100-mile sprints through spreadsheets and quarterly projections. She knew she was exhausted, but she figured, hey, that's the price of success, right? Everyone in her world felt this way. They all drank expensive coffee and talked about how little they slept, wearing it like a badge of honor. But the hum got louder. One Tuesday morning, Sarah was supposed to lead the Q3 strategy meeting. This was her baby. She had pulled 3 all-nighters to finalize the presentation. She walked into the boardroom, all polished mahogany and uncomfortable ergonomic chairs, and stood at the podium. She clicked the remote to advance the slide, and nothing happened. She clicked again. Still nothing. A little bead of sweat formed on her hairline. She tried the keyboard. Blank. Just a moment, folks, she said, her voice sounding unnaturally high, like a squeak. The problem wasn't the computer. The problem was that her mind, the finely tuned engine that had run her life for over a decade, had simply decided to disconnect from the hardware. She looked at the screen, and the numbers that were supposed to be her allies suddenly looked like hieroglyphics. She couldn't remember the key metrics. She couldn't remember the point of the meeting. Mr. Henderson, the VP of Operations, leaned forward, his face etched with impatience. Sarah, are we having technical difficulties, or are we having a delay? That was the trigger. The room was hot. The mahogany was oppressive, and the silence felt like physical weight pressing down on her chest. All the sleepless nights, all the skipped meals, all the ignored anxiety, it all rushed forward at once. Sarah didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just stood there, clutching the remote, and she started shaking, not dramatically, but a deep internal tremor. She looked at Mr. Henderson, opened her mouth to speak, and what came out was a gasp. Then another. She had lost the ability to form a coherent sentence. She stumbled back from the podium and grabbed the nearest chair. Sinking into it, she covered her face with her hands, not because she was crying, but because she felt like her entire internal structure was dissolving, and she didn't want anyone to see the pieces fall out. That moment, right there, was the official start of the breakdown. The meeting was adjourned, obviously. Sarah was escorted out, not by a friend or a concerned colleague, but by Janice from HR, who had the cool antiseptic efficiency of a hospital nurse. We need to talk about next steps, Sarah, Janice said, her voice flat and professional as they walked through the brightly lit minimalist halls. We take employee well-being very seriously here at Synergy Solutions, and this is where the experts came in. Synergy Solutions was very proud of its holistic wellness and performance optimization program. They didn't just have HR. They had a dedicated team of consultants, coaches, and corporate psychologists designed to get the most out of their expensive talent. Sarah was ushered into a small, windowless office belonging to Dr. Elena Vance, the head of Workplace Resilience. Dr. Vance was immaculate. Sharp suit, expensive glasses, and an air of detached, clinical calm. "Hello, Sarah," Dr. Vance said, gesturing to a plush, uncomfortable chair. "Let's talk about what happened in the boardroom. We call that an acute stress manifestation event." Sarah felt a surge of frustration. "It was a panic attack, Dr. Vance. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think." "We prefer acute stress manifestation," Dr. Vance corrected gently. "It sounds less clinical. Now, I see here that you have been logging 80 to 90 hours a week for the last 2 quarters. This is unsustainable, even for a high performer like yourself. We need to implement immediate corrective actions." Sarah leaned forward, hopeful. Finally, someone was going to recognize the impossible workload, the pressure cooker environment. Maybe they'd redistribute her tasks or hire an assistant. "What do you suggest?" Sarah asked. Dr. Vance folded her hands precisely on her desk. "We are going to enroll you in our Mindfulness and Optimal Flow module. It's a 6-week online course. It teaches you deep breathing techniques. Also, I want you to download the Zen Focus app. It has excellent guided meditations for 10 minutes before bed." Sarah stared. "You think 10 minutes of meditation is going to fix 12 years of burnout?" "It's a powerful tool, Sarah," Dr. Vance insisted, her voice losing a fraction of its warmth. "The problem isn't the environment. The problem is how you are interacting with the environment. You need to recalibrate your internal response mechanism. You are viewing stress as an enemy instead of an energy source." Dr. Vance then handed her a glossy pamphlet titled, "Harnessing Stress for Peak Performance." Sarah felt the panic attack threatening to return, but this time it was laced with thick, bitter anger. She had laid her soul bare, admitting she was drowning, and they handed her a pamphlet and told her breathe deeper while still swimming in the same shark-infested waters. Over the next 2 weeks, the situation deteriorated rapidly, exactly as Sarah had feared. She tried the deep breathing. She tried the Zen Focus app, which only annoyed her with its synthesized wind chimes. The experts had given her the tools to cope, but they hadn't taken away the source of the pain. She still had the same impossible deadlines, the same demanding VP, and now the added pressure knowing everyone was watching her, waiting for the next stress manifestation event. She started making mistakes. Small ones at first. Transposed numbers, missed emails. Then bigger ones. She accidentally deleted a critical file that took her team 3 days to recover. Another meeting was called. This time, it was Mr. Henderson, Janice from HR, and Dr. Vance, all sitting across the table like a corporate tribunal. "Sarah, we are concerned," Mr. Henderson said, his voice now devoid of any pretense of care. "We invested significant resources in your recovery path, and the metrics show a decline in output and an increase in critical errors. We need to see progress." "I am trying," Sarah pleaded, feeling small and defensive. "I am sleeping 4 hours a night. I can't focus. I feel like I'm walking through wet cement all day. Have you been utilizing the mindfulness protocols?" Dr. Vance asked, clipboard in hand. "Yes. They don't work when I have 3 different people yelling at me about deadlines." But Sarah," Dr. Vance said, leaning forward conspiratorially, as if revealing a great secret. "The goal of mindfulness is not to eliminate external noise, but to change your perception of the noise. View the deadlines not as pressure, but as opportunities for focused energy expenditure." It was all buzzwords and empty calories. They talked about self-care, while simultaneously demanding productivity metrics that made true self-care impossible. They were experts in maximizing profit, not in healing people. They saw her not as a human being in pain, but as a faulty system component that needed a quick software patch. They suggested a managed leave of absence, corporate speak for, "Go home and fix yourself, but don't expect us to pay you much while you do it." Sarah left that meeting feeling hollowed out. She realized a terrible truth. They didn't care if she got better. They just cared that she stopped being a disruption. Her breakdown, which felt like the end of the world to her, was just an inconvenient data point to them. She went back to her cube, packed her laptop bag, her hands moving slowly, stiffly, and walked out of Synergy Solutions for what she knew would be a long, long time. It was late afternoon. The sun was starting to drop over Lake Michigan, casting long shadows across the concrete canyons of downtown Chicago. Sarah didn't go home. Her apartment felt like a highly organized cage. She didn't want to see her Zen Focus app or her carefully curated shelves. She just wanted to disappear. She found herself walking aimlessly, moving away from the gleaming towers and into the older, more residential parts of the city. She kept walking until her feet ached, the expensive leather pumps protesting every step. Eventually, she reached a major thoroughfare, far from the loop, where the air smelled like exhaust and cheap pizza instead of filtered corporate air conditioning. She saw a bus stop, and without thinking, she pulled out her transit card and stepped onto the next bus that arrived. It was a Route 66 bus, heading west, away from the glittering downtown she had spent her life serving. The bus was nearly empty. It was old, the seats were covered in worn blue vinyl, and the engine rattled inside every time the driver hit the gas. Sarah chose a seat near the middle, leaning her head against the cool glass of the window, watching the neighborhood slide by. The constant anxiety, the buzzing noise in her head, finally started to abate, replaced by a dull, heavy exhaustion. She was invisible here. No one knew her name or her title or her quarterly goals. She rode for a long time, maybe an hour. The city gave way to suburbs, and then to places that felt almost rural, though they were still technically within the sprawl. The sun was almost gone now, bleeding orange and purple onto the horizon. Finally, the bus stopped at a terminus, a desolate corner near a closed-down diner and a sprawling, empty parking lot. The driver, a man named Earl according to the little plastic name tag on his shirt, stood up and stretched. He was a big man, maybe late 50s, with kind eyes and a thick, graying mustache. He wore the standard blue uniform, and he moved with the slow, deliberate pace of someone who had seen it all and wasn't impressed by any of it. "End of the line, ma'am," Earl said, his voice a deep, gravelly baritone. Sarah blinked, realizing she was the only passenger left. "Oh, I didn't realize." "Happens all the time," Earl chuckled, retrieving a thermos from a small bag. "Folks get on just riding. You look like you needed a ride, though." Sarah stood up, feeling awkward. She was still in her expensive suit, completely out of place on this deserted corner. She hesitated, unsure where to go next. She felt a wave of nausea, the culmination of stress and lack of food. She looked at the bus driver, Earl, and suddenly, the carefully constructed dam she had built to hold back her emotions broke. She didn't cry dramatically, but a single, hot tear rolled down her cheek. "I don't know where I'm going," she admitted, the words barely a whisper. "I literally don't know where to go next." Earl didn't offer a pamphlet. He didn't suggest she download an app or think about her optimal flow. He just looked at her, really looked at the exhausted woman standing in his empty bus, and he nodded slowly. He took a sip of whatever was in his thermos, probably lukewarm coffee, and then he leaned back against the steering wheel. "Ma'am," he said, and his voice was gentle, direct, and completely free of corporate nonsense. "You got off the right bus." Sarah frowned, wiping her cheek. "What do you mean?" Earl gestured vaguely toward the empty road stretching out before them, away from the city lights. "You look like you've been driving a fast car into a brick wall for a long time," he said. "The experts downtown, they probably told you to put a cushion on the wall. They told you to wear a helmet. They told you to meditate on the force of the crash. Am I right?" Sarah was stunned. This man, a bus driver on the outskirts of the city, had summed up 2 weeks of expensive consulting in 30 seconds. "Yes," she breathed. "Exactly." "Well, listen to old Earl," he said, his eyes twinkling a little. "You didn't need to learn how to hit the wall better. You just needed to realize you were on the wrong route. This bus stops, lady. It gives you a chance to look around. You got off the right bus because you finally stopped moving." He paused, letting the silence of the empty lot fill the space. "Now you can stand here and worry about where the next bus is going, or you can just appreciate the quiet for 5 minutes. You don't need a plan right now. You just need to stop." And you did. Sarah felt a strange calm wash over her. It wasn't the forced, clinical calm of the mindfulness apps. It was genuine. It was a feeling of a heavy burden being lifted, just because one person recognized a simple truth. She'd been going too fast for too long, in the wrong direction. "What do I do now?" she asked, her voice softer. Earl shrugged, setting his thermos down. "First thing, get some air that hasn't been recycled by an HVAC system for a week. Second, maybe get something to eat. You look like you could snap in half." He was right. She had completely forgotten to eat. The idea of food, simple, greasy diner food, suddenly sounded better than any 3-star Michelin meal she usually forced herself to attend for networking. "There's a good place about a mile down the road," Earl said, pointing down the street. "It's called the Blue Plate. They got the best mashed potatoes in the county. Just walk until you feel the need to sit down. That's your only goal tonight." Sarah stood there, looking at the man who was supposed to be just a transit employee, realizing he was the only true expert she had encountered in months. He wasn't trying to optimize her performance. He was trying to optimize her survival. She gave him a weak smile. "Thank you, Earl. Seriously. No problem, ma'am. Just remember that feeling you got when you finally stopped? Hold on to that. That's the real metric you should be tracking." Sarah stepped off the bus, her feet hitting the cracked asphalt of the terminus. She turned and watched as Earl closed the door, started the engine, and slowly pulled the bus away, disappearing into the twilight to park it for the night. She was alone. She was exhausted. She was a mile from a diner she'd never heard of, in a part of Chicago she didn't know existed. But for the first time in months, she wasn't shaking. She had stopped, and that was the beginning of everything. She started walking toward the distant, flickering neon sign of the Blue Plate, leaving the high-rise towers of Synergy Solutions far behind her, ready to find out what happens when you finally abandon the roadmap the experts gave you. The path forward was messy and uncertain, but it was hers, and it started with mashed potatoes. That flickering neon sign of the Blue Plate was a beacon in the twilight, a warm, greasy promise after the cold, sterile light of Synergy Solutions. Sarah walked a mile, her expensive pumps clicking softly on the worn pavement, and every step was a small, quiet rebellion. When she pushed open a heavy glass door, a little bell above her head jingled loudly. The air inside smelled heavenly, fried onions, coffee, and just a hint of chlorine from the mop bucket. It was loud, lived in, and gloriously imperfect. The place was populated by a few locals, a couple of old men nursing coffee at the counter, a family arguing good-naturedly in a booth. Sarah, still in her tailored suit, felt like an alien who had landed in the wrong quadrant, but no one stared. They were too busy eating. She slid into a vinyl booth by the window. The waitress, a woman named Betty with a tower of blonde hair and a name tag that read, "Been here since '85, slapped a laminated menu down in front of her. "Coffee?" Betty asked, not unkindly. "Please," Sarah whispered. The coffee arrived immediately, thick and black, in a chipped ceramic mug. Sarah wrapped her hands around it. It wasn't the artisanal single-origin pour-over she drank at Synergy. It was just coffee, and it was perfect. When she ordered, she didn't look at the menu. Mashed potatoes, she said, and maybe some meatloaf. The food arrived quickly. It was simple, heavy, and drenched in brown gravy. It was the antithesis of the tiny, artistically arranged plates she usually ate while trying to impress clients. Sarah ate slowly, savoring every bite. It was the first time in months she had truly tasted food. As she ate the comforting, starchy meal, the tension that had been locked in her jaw for years finally began to ease. She realized that everything Dr. Vance had told her, all the talk about optimal flow, harnessing stress, and mental recalibration, was just noise designed to keep the machine running. Earl, the bus driver, hadn't offered a solution. He had offered permission. Permission to stop. She spent the night in a cheap, clean motel room she found nearby. It was miles from her high-rise, and the window looked out onto a parking lot, not the glittering skyline. She took a hot shower, put on a scratchy cotton robe, and simply collapsed onto the bed. She didn't set an alarm. She didn't check her phone. She didn't try to meditate. She slept for 12 solid hours. When she woke up, the silence was deafening. The buzzing in her head was gone. It felt like someone had finally turned off the internal fluorescent light she'd been forced to live under. The next morning, she knew she couldn't go back to her apartment yet. She needed to maintain the distance. She called her building manager and arranged for a friend to pick up a suitcase of clothes. She told her friend she was taking a trip, vague about the destination. For the next 2 weeks, Sarah lived in a state of deliberate non-productivity. She checked into a small rental cottage outside the city limits, a place so quiet she could hear the wind chimes next door. She spent her days doing things that would have horrified her corporate self. She read novels, the kind with easy plots and happy endings. She watched terrible daytime television. She walked for hours, not because she was tracking her steps for fitness, but because she wanted to see what was around the next bend in the road. The healing wasn't linear. There were days when the old habits resurfaced. She'd wake up at 5:30 a.m., heart pounding, convinced she had missed a critical email. She would start to organize a drawer, only to realize she was falling back into compulsion for control. But now, she had Earl's voice in her head. You just needed to stop moving. She learned to sit with the discomfort, not to optimize it, but just to feel it and let it pass. About 3 weeks into her managed leave, the reality of the situation at Synergy Solutions came crashing back. Janice from HR called. Sarah, we need an update on your return strategy, Janice said, her voice still professionally flat. Dr. Vance requires a progress report on your utilization of the Zen Focus app and your deep breathing techniques. Sarah felt a smile spread across her face, a real, genuine smile, fueled by a sense of freedom. Janice, Sarah said, her voice calm and steady. I'm not coming back. There was a pause on the line, a long, stunned corporate silence. I'm sorry, Sarah. I don't think I heard you correctly. Are you resigning? Yes, Sarah confirmed. I am resigning, effective immediately. I'll send you an email later today, but please consider this my formal notice. But your career trajectory, Sarah, your compensation package. We've invested so much in your development. Janice sounded genuinely distressed, not for Sarah, but for the wasted corporate resources. You invested in my optimization, Janice, Sarah replied. You didn't invest in my well-being. I found a better investment. She hung up the phone and felt an exhilarating rush of terror and relief. She had burned the bridge, but she was finally standing on solid ground. The weeks that followed were spent dismantling the life she had built. She sold her sleek furniture and moved out of the glass tower apartment, trading the high-rise view for a small, slightly cluttered bungalow in a vibrant, diverse neighborhood far from the loop. She realized her primary skill wasn't just data integrity. It was systems thinking. She was brilliant at taking a complex, chaotic mess and creating a functional, efficient structure. That skill was valuable, but it didn't belong to Synergy Solutions. It belonged to her. She started small. She volunteered at a local food bank. The logistics were a nightmare. Donations were piled haphazardly. Volunteers were inefficiently scheduled, and the routing for deliveries was costing them thousands in unnecessary gas. Sarah didn't try to optimize the people. She optimized the process so the people could work less frantically and more effectively. She created a simple, color-coded inventory system using basic spreadsheet software. She analyzed the traffic patterns and redesigned delivery routes. The director of the food bank, a tired but dedicated woman named Maria, watched Sarah work for a week. Maria didn't talk about optimal flow or harnessing pressure. She just kept saying, "Thank you. This is making a difference." One afternoon, Maria came into the small office where Sarah was working. "Sarah, what are you doing with your life? Because whatever it is, you need to do it here. I can't pay you what Synergy Solutions paid you, but I can pay you what we have. We need a director of logistics. Permanently." Sarah accepted. The salary was a fraction of her old income, but the stress was zero. The purpose, however, was immense. Her job was no longer about making the rich richer. It was about ensuring that people who needed help got efficiently and with dignity. Her life was still busy, but it was meaningful busy. She still analyzed data, but now the metrics she cared about were, how many families did we feed today? And how much fuel did we save? About 6 months after she left the loop, Sarah found herself back on the west side of the city. She had a delivery route that took her close to the terminus of the Route 66 bus line. It was late afternoon, the same time she had arrived that fateful day. She parked the food bank's beat-up minivan near the closed diner and waited. She didn't know if Earl still drove the route, but she felt a powerful need to thank him. Sure enough, a few minutes later, the familiar rattle inside of the Route 66 bus announced its arrival. Earl pulled the bus into the terminus. The same big man, same graying mustache, same slow, deliberate movements. He saw her standing there, not in the expensive suit, but in jeans and a logoed food bank polo shirt. He squinted, then his eyes widened in recognition. "Well, I'll be," Earl said, stepping down from the bus. "Look at you. You look taller." Sarah laughed, a sound that felt easy and unrestrained. "I think I'm just standing up straighter, Earl. I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "Giving you a ride." "For giving me the only truly useful piece of advice I got in 12 years, Sarah said, walking closer. "You told me I needed to realize I was on the wrong route, and I needed to stop moving." Earl nodded, taking a sip from his thermos. "Simple physics, ma'am. You can't change direction if you're doing 80 miles an hour. The experts told me to keep driving, just to breathe deeper while I did it," Sarah recalled, shaking her head. "They gave me tools to cope with the madness. You told me the madness wasn't mandatory. That's the difference between a mechanic and a driver, I suppose," Earl mused. "The mechanic wants to keep the engine running, no matter where it's going. The driver knows the destination matters." Sarah paused, thinking about her new life, the messy, rewarding, challenging life of community service. "I'm working for a food bank now. I use my system skills to help them manage their logistics. It's hard work, but I sleep through the night." "Good," Earl said, a slow, warm smile spreading across his face. "You found your new route. And I finally understood what you meant when you said I got off the right bus," Sarah continued. "I had to stop being Sarah Jenkins, senior systems analyst, before I could figure out who Sarah Jenkins actually was. Earl chuckled, putting his thermos away. He climbed back into the bus, ready to start his evening run back toward the city lights. "Remember this, ma'am," he said, leaning out the door before closing it. "The city is full of people driving fast and feeling important. But the ones who really know the road, they know when to take a detour, and they definitely know when it's time to pull over." He closed the door and the Route 66 bus pulled away, slowly and deliberately, heading back toward the glow of downtown. Sarah watched him go, feeling a deep, quiet sense of gratitude. She had walked away from a six-figure salary, a corner office, and a title that impressed everyone. She had traded it all for mashed potatoes, 12 hours of sleep, and the simple, profound wisdom of a man whose job was just to guide people safely from point A to point B. She hadn't needed a corporate psychologist to heal her burnout. She needed a bus driver to remind her that life wasn't a race for peak performance. It was a journey, and sometimes the most important system optimization you could perform was hitting the brakes. She got into the minivan, adjusted the rear view mirror, a small, unnecessary act of control, and headed down the road toward her next delivery. She was on her own path now, and for the first time in her life, she was absolutely certain she was heading in the right direction.